So before we get started, I kind of want to talk about like I have a new Nespresso machine, and anybody who has a Nespresso machine as kind of I guess mini commercial, it's actually pretty good, but it adjusts the amount of coffee you get based upon the pod you have. And sometimes you'll put a pod in, like as an American, I'm expecting a 8-ounce cup of coffee or a 6-ounce cup
Yes.
of coffee. And sometimes you get out like this shot of espresso, or you get out like a 3.7-ounce pour, and you're like, what
Uh,
the heck is this crap? And so Skip was just telling me you can adjust the volume of water that goes in. So as an American, I can have an Americano of anything.
yes.
So,
That's what it
all
has to
right.
be for me.
So, for this episode of Humanize IT, we're talking about how to fire your client. And this actually is significantly different than our previous episode of how to fire MSP, because there are legalities here that we
Yes.
have to really
Very
look at.
much so.
So with the MSP, we didn't talk too much about like contract length. So if you got into a long contract, how to get out of that, and that's a lawyer topic. But
Yes.
with firing a client, there are a lot of obligations that you have to look at before you can fire a client. And there are some clever ways to get out of obligations in very good ways that leave everybody feeling nice.
But
So,
before we get into the firing, let me take the obligatory, pause and say, are you sure you really want to fire these guys? All right. So I'm not sure where this statistic came from, but it sounds good. And I think a bunch of us in the MSP community kind of agree with it, whether it's accurate or not. But the number was it takes 7 times more money or resources to obtain a new client versus maintaining an existing client.
correct.
So look at that. You have spent the resources to obtain this client. You have them now. You're not happy. All right. Is it really worth it to you to drop and, cut the line on that resource and go spend 7 times more to gain a new client? All right. Those numbers may or may not be right, but think about that whole process. And it's similar to our conversation last podcast from the business side. List your pain points with these guys. What is the problem? Why do you not like them? Do they have a point of contact that is just too difficult to deal with? I had one time, and the point of contact was actually verbally abusive to my staff. And so,
Mm,
we called up the president and said, "Hey, this ain't going to work." And so we got a new point of contact, and things changed. We were ready to fire them just because dealing with this person was so, well, at some points humiliating, having
yeah.
to endure this. So, that's maybe an extreme example, but list why you want to get rid of this customer and then see, is there a solution to this? And if not, then we can proceed down this conversation.
Yeah. Definitely want to make sure that getting rid of your client is in your best interests. Maybe again, to talk about the right person, right seat is a fit for clients as well. Are they an entity that you can adequately support? And maybe it is something toxic, like your point of contact is just abusive. In that case, you can talk to the president, like Skip said, and switch up a point of contact. Maybe they got just saddled with you and they're bitter about it.
Yep.
They don't really care about dealing with technical stuff, but it just so happened they took over because they were trying to pad their portfolio. I don't know. But you can talk to the client about, let's fix the cultural issues if there is one. So an abusive point of contact, that's a cultural problem. If it
Mhm.
cannot be resolved, then you switch. You find a new MSP for them. Be step one. That make a recommendation like, hey, MSP Y over here really does a great job with banks, or does a great job with puppy kennels, whatever it is that you're dealing with, and say we would refer you over to them. You're not a good fit for us, and you can tell them like, hey, we're really trying to focus on the vertical of healthcare, and we want you to have the best care that you can get, and so we really recommend you switch over to this other person. So have an exit strategy for them is my first tip
Yeah.
to make
So,
this go smooth.
yeah, and I think I'm going to get this wrong, but I heard this kind of conglomeration of words, this mismatch. It was a friendator or something, a combination of friend and competitor. All right, someone's going to know. I've heard it several times. All right, I can't remember what it is, but as an MSP, you really do need to maintain some relationships with other MSPs. All right, you have to realize that you are not going to be able to be all things to all people. All right, and if you come across somebody, whether it's a current customer or even a prospective customer, that you can't service, having a role in connecting them with someone else who can take care of their needs is a valuable relationship skill. So don't feel like every other MSP in your marketplace is, the evil enemy. All right. They're just folks running a business, trying to make a living just like you are. And sometimes there are opportunities for partnerships. Sometimes there are opportunities for referrals. Not all MSPs are good. So you want to make sure you maintain those relationships with good MSPs. But don't be so isolated. Don't be so us and them in this thought process.
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit in a few episodes ago. Is having your vertical defined, understanding who you are. So when you're creating your MSP, say this is who the kind of clients we want. This is our ideal client set, and then going through your current clients, say these people don't fit with us, but being able to know which competitor they do fit with. And maybe that creates that relationship where they throw you a bone. So they start throwing you clients that you want. So you're in healthcare and you like to support medical clinics. And then your competitor is in with finance. They love supporting like law offices and CPAs. And that's their vertical. Now
Yeah.
everybody's happy because you're firing your client, yes, but let's talk about transitioning them. And maybe instead is firing being too harsh of a word. And that's where you have that, like we talked about last episode, that bundle, like, hey, here's all the admin passwords, here's everything they need. So when the client gives me the thumbs up, I can just hand this package over and everybody's happy and it's a clean transition. But, some of the tips on getting rid of a client. So we're not going to talk about toxicity, but Skip talks really well about how it could be a nice client. They're just not in your vertical. And in that case, check your engagement letter. Like, what is it you're supposed to be doing for them? Do you have any open projects with them that you need to be closing out? Check these things and create a transition time. And so that when you're working with the new MSP, it's not like if they're firing you, they're flipping a switch usually.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's a healthy situation, a healthy transition, you're switching over easily to a new MSP. But if it's a toxic, like as Skip said, the jerk who just is berating you guys all the time, demanding you come in off hours, he's killing your engineers. Then in that case, it might just be a matter of looking through your engagement letter, looking through that legal contract, and say, "Here is my exit. I'm enacting clause 6B." And you let them know officially, create the paper trail and do everything like that. So toxic firing of clients, that has to be handled in a different way than transitioning them to an easy new MSP. So toxic wise, if they're like a jerk, if they're just absolutely somebody you just despise because maybe, I don't know, they're white supremacists, I don't know, maybe they kick puppies in their spare time, and you say, I cannot support this company. You guys do not align with us. You have berated and abused my employees. Do not say those things out loud, please.
Right.
Depending on the state you're in. In Nebraska, it's not as that big of a deal, but depending on the laws in your state, you want to make this as clean and easy as possible. So if you walk into a toxic situation, you say, you make a printout, you email it, and you walk in there with it and you say, we are enacting clause 6B, which states that here are the reasons why we can terminate the contract. Most of you have somewhere in your contract says either party can terminate contract at any time.
Yes, and you don't want to be impulsive about this, because you may go, hey, we're enacting clause 6B, and you fire it off, in a bit of a fit, because you've had it. It was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And the last thing you want is your client some sort of pseudo self-taught legal expert or whatever. There's a lot of those out there, and they counter back with, well, client clause 6C says that you have to do this for me, and all of a sudden, you might have a mountain of work to do to get out of that engagement that you didn't plan on. So I know it's frustrating sometimes. We really do. I think MSPs really try for a long, long time to hang on to their customers. When that point arrives where we're firing customers as an MSP, my experience has been, as an MSP, when we fire our customers, we're probably overdue for that.
Yeah.
Right. And so the problem with that is it leads us to a very frustrating point. We're just done. And we can be impulsive when we do that. So you have to resist that. So, slow yourself down, maybe, be a little bit quicker to fire some of your customers. If you think it's going to go that way, don't drag it out. Try to fix it. If we can't fix it, let's methodically move on with the process.
Yeah. And, I kind of, we do this in our company, is where we measure the success of a client. We use a couple products to help us with this and say, hey, how engaged is our client? How healthy are they? We have a number of metrics to show how healthy they are. In your MSP, you should do the same thing. When was the last time you went down your client list and said, hey, how are we doing on each of these clients? Are there clients we need to reach out with for client engagement and make things healthier? Are we getting a lot of tickets from them? Are they a healthy point of contact? So going through that like once a year and looking at your client engagement scores, or looking at something similar and saying, hey, is this a good client for us? Or is there a way to make this client relationship better? Or is this somebody we need to hand off? We really have no interest in being in the manufacturing industry. We got this client because early on we were desperate for clients. They paid well. Bob knew the owner, and we started doing business with them. Now we've grown. They're draining a lot of resources because we decided not to go with that vertical. We should hand them off to Alice's MSP over here because they really do a great job with those. And maybe that'll create that relationship with Alice. So going through your client list and deciding which ones are in your vertical, which ones are good clients for you, and which ones are not. Because if you get rid of a bad client, that is probably, as Skip says, overdue. And when you get rid of them, especially toxic clients, they tend to take up an inordinate amount of time.
They do.
And that frees up maybe 2 or 3 slots for new clients so you can make more money.
Well, and they affect your company culture as well. Those toxic clients, that they really drag on your team. Everyone hates it when a ticket shows up. No one wants to go on site to those guys. It creates some internal strife. Your team will perform better when those toxic customers are gone. So that brings me up to my next point here. If you're going to fire someone, fire them. Okay, be intentional about it. So don't go, oh, this is just, I hate dealing with these people. I'm going to start jacking their price up so much so they go away. All right. So no, if you have a problem with the pricing, if you are unprofitable in a client, deal with the profitability issue. Raise the prices as appropriate. You should be compensated for your services. But if you have a client who's simply toxic, raising the prices is not the answer, because what happens? You raise the prices, so you're making more money, but they're still toxic.
Yeah.
Okay, you're just paying more money they're just paying you more money for the same toxicity. So and money doesn't make toxicity go away. So
it sure does make it softer, though.
Sometimes, but again, so the money may make you feel better as the business owner, but again, that toxic relationship impacts your team and your staff more than it probably does you. So while your bank account feels good, your team is still under the same negative influences of that toxic environment.
Yeah, there's a time in which you start losing engineers because no one wants to deal with this client. And you guys all know what I'm talking about. And you have these clients that it's like, oh, who gets, that client? Anyways, but the whole point is you want to know who they are. You want to identify why you want to get rid of them, and then you want to come up with a good transition plan. A really great way to let go of a client is give them a notice and saying, hey, we're planning on executing option 6B on June 16th. That gives you 60-day window to look and try to find a new MSP. We highly recommend you try Alice's MSP across the street. She's really great at what she does. And that's that easy transition is going to give you the opportunity, like what Skip said earlier. They may refer other people to you in the future. And so that's great if you're very clear with them about like, hey, we're trying to focus on the healthcare vertical, but we really value you and want you taken care of. Please go see Alice. We'd like to set up a meeting with you or facilitate that transition. Then all of a sudden you've actually made an advocate for yourself as you transition this company out. So maybe Bob Manufacturing decided that they need to move over to Alice, and they love the idea of moving over to somebody who's more manufacturing friendly. And you say, we're focusing on healthcare. Well, Bob is a business owner. Bob knows people who are in a variety of companies, whether his peer groups or networking groups or golfing events. And he's going to be like, oh man, that my MSP was really great. We weren't a good fit for them, but they're really focusing on dental offices and medical clinics. I think you should try them out. And then they're like sitting there playing golf and they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, I'll give them a call. And
Absolutely.
that's a fantastic way to transition a client and keep that culture alive. And so I don't want to, with this episode, I really didn't want to focus on the toxic clients, but toxic clients are out there.
They
and how
are.
do you identify a toxic client becomes another point for this podcast. So a bad fit toxic client is one where you need to ask your engineers. You need to ask your account managers, hey, on your client list, if you could fire one client, who would it be?
Ooh, that'd be
And
good.
ask your account managers who they recommend. And it might be this that they're happy with their client list. Like, well, if I had to pick somebody, it would be Bob because they're manufacturing. We really don't do much work with them. And it's kind of a pain to look up the documentation every time. And they'd be like, oh, well, tell me more. And then you can kind of ease into that and be like, oh, you know what? Maybe we should get rid of Bob. I like him. Let me talk him to owner and we'll figure it out. Or they may say, I really hate dealing with this person at this company because every time we call them, they suck us into 16 different tickets while on site.
Yes.
They constantly driving by and everything's an emergency and it's killing us on
our
projects.
Processes. Yes.
Yep.
Breaking your processes, interfering with your culture, really taking your team. You got a talented team and you build processes around all this and you've got tickets and you've got reporting tools. And if this client is always the exception to everything that you're creating, then they're an anchor. They're dragging down your other clients, and the profitability that you could have in those other clients are being drug under by these one customers. You have to think about how that impacts, the entire perspective.
Correct. Yeah, and your account managers are going to know this, but you have to ask them the questions. Who should we fire? And then the response to that can be something simple like, oh, well, let's fix that situation. Or it may be, let's fix that situation. And so then you can take care of it. So, because sometimes your account managers, they see that this contract is worth like $6,000 a month. They don't want to lose it because they know it's a lot of money for the company. But you as an owner can look at that $6,000 and be like, man, if they're filling out that many tickets, if they're causing this much problem, I'd rather have $2,000-$3,000 clients sitting here.
Yeah.
Or I'd rather have two $2,000 clients sitting here than wasting resources on this opportunity. And then what happens is over time, you start developing this culture where you have clients that you enjoy, that you love, and everybody's happy. And then all of a sudden, other engineers in town find out that your MSP has a really healthy culture. And they're like, oh, I want to go work for that MSP because they have great clients.
They have fun at work. They enjoy what they're doing.
You can tell that this MSP really takes care of their employees. They fired a client the other day because it was making their account manager irritated. Oh my goodness!
Now, so
got their back.
Account managers are going to be tuned into this, but again, this is my ops side coming out of me. It's pretty simple to run a report and look at all the tickets that you have for that client, and then sort it and see which one of your engineers is servicing most of the tickets. All right. And you're going to go, depending on your MSP and your structure, you may kind of go down the technical chain. It may be just that one engineer that's been with the company for a couple of years. There's on the border between entry level and mid-tier engineer. Just one of your employees, go talk to that one engineer and say, tell me about this company. What's the relationship like? How are things going? Because this is the person who is interacting with this customer more than anybody else, more than the account manager. All right, they're going to be the ones, sometimes daily interactions with quite possibly multiple people inside the company, and they're going to be able to give you some insight. Now, they're looking at things from downstream, right? So their perspective may be a bit skewed, but they're going to have a perspective that no one else in your organization has.
Yeah. And that's another way to fire a client internally, as we did not talk about in this podcast, was moving, for you larger MSPs, moving a client to a new engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So asking your engineers, do you have any toxic clients? And maybe they're just not a good fit for that client, and switching it to a new engineer. And if you have no engineers left to assign them, then you fire the client.
Yep.
You have to think of this stuff in a more fluid situation than, is this client good for me or are they not? You have to think of it in terms of, how do you fire a client? Sometimes you move them to a new MSP. Sometimes you just drop them carte blanche because it's so toxic. Maybe you find out they're selling cocaine inside their company. You got to drop that stuff, man.
Yeah.
You've got to figure out some way to distance yourself from toxic ones, but also you have to find some way to transition a client to a healthier situation, such as a new engineer or a new MSP. And to do that, check your engagement letters, talk to them and explain to them the situation. And then you might just end up with a really healthy client off of that, or you might be able to transition over to a new client and get a great advocate out of this. But hanging on to an unhealthy situation is the last thing you want to do. Just because the money is good does not mean it's worth it. I can tell you for a fact that if you get rid of a whale, you just make more room for more clients. And as every business owner knows, whales are nice in the beginning.
Yep,
high-paying customers are great.
Are awesome.
But you cannot. They are very toxic for you, because if you lose them at an inopportune time, bad things happen.
Yeah.
But if you lose a whale, a lot of times they get backfilled by smaller fish. And in that situation, you're much healthier as an organization. So you've got to really think about that. I know a lot of people disagree with my statement there, but I am a big fan of having great clients in a diverse portfolio, and that you aren't stuck servicing one client as your primary, that you can get rid of a client if you choose to. If you're not in a situation where you can't drop a client, then you're in a toxic situation, and you've got to figure out a way out of that.
You don't have control over your business at that point.
Some of you are boutiques, and you've got one very large entity, and that's how you built your business. Well, what happens when that entity goes away? You have to have a contingency plan. And so have that contingency plan ready. But then once you're in a good place, you can transition toxic clients, or you can transition clients that are just the wrong seat for you, that they're just not the right culture fit. Either one can be transitioned over to a healthier place. And you can see this happen. Like, as your MSP gets healthier and healthier, and you're able to pick and choose your clients, it's great. Some of you are still in the beginning stages where you can't really afford to lose clients. But at the same time, you can't afford to pack your portfolio with clients who are unhealthy, because what will happen is you'll become a dumping ground eventually of all these toxic clients. So all the good clients are taken up by these MSPs who've been in the game for a while. And then you are the catch-all for the toxic clients, and no one wants that job.
And no one wants to work with you.
And no one's going to work for you.
At least not good employees. So, you're going to have... it is going to generate a lot of internal problems. I guess the toxic clients, have I've personally seen the impact that has to a team several times. And while it may be hard, your business owner side, says, hey, they're paying us, so many thousands of dollars a month, and you need that for your budget. That old saying, you really have to remember, not all business is good business.
Not all business is good business. Correct. I think that's a great way to end this podcast is know your clients. And if you need to get rid of one, have a plan. Sit down, review your client list at least once a year, figure out which ones need to be transitioned out, which ones can be improved, and which ones are your best clients, and figure out why. So, how to fire a client. Great topic today. I think the biggest takeaway is not all business is good business, and have a plan. So I thank you for guys for coming on. We got some great topics coming up. We are in February here, so I am looking forward to really hitting up the topics of, let's see here, let me find it out. How to find a good engineer. How to identify different MSPs in your marketplace and what their verticals are. So we have some really great topics coming up, and I'm hoping to get a couple guest speakers on to really talk and deep dive into how we service our clients and how to identify great service providers. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next week.